I never thought I'd wake up one day and find out that my own home was no longer mine. That everything I had worked for, every dollar, every late-night overtime shift, every sacrifice, was about to be taken from me by a group of people who had done nothing to earn it. But that's exactly what happened. It started with a simple letter slipped into my mailbox like it was just another flyer. The envelope looked official, stamped with the HOA's logo in bold letters, almost mocking me. I ripped it open, skimming through the words, my pulse quickening with every line. Past due balance, $50,000. Immediate payment required. My stomach twisted. $50,000? That had to be a mistake. I had always paid my dues on time, never missed a single payment. I flipped through the pages, looking for an explanation, and that's when I saw it. Late fees, interest, special community charges, legal processing fees. It was like they had piled on every charge they could think of, layer upon layer, until it became something impossible to fight. I stormed into the HOA office the next morning, gripping the letter so tightly my fingers ached. The office was pristine, almost too perfect, smelling like fresh coffee and overpriced cologne. Behind the front desk sat a woman with a nameplate that read Linda, HOA treasurer. She barely glanced up. "I'm here about this," I said, slamming the letter onto the counter. She sighed, adjusting her glasses. "What seems to be the issue?" I gritted my teeth. "The issue is that I'm being charged $50,000 out of nowhere." Linda finally looked at me, tilting her head. "Oh, you must be Mr. Carter." "Yes, we've been expecting you." A cold chill ran down my spine. "Expecting me?" She slid a folder toward me. "Your fees have accumulated due to multiple violations and non-payments." I flipped through the pages, my pulse hammering. Unauthorized exterior paint color. Grass exceeding community standards. Improperly parked vehicle. Excess noise complaints. Some of these so-called violations were from months ago, things I had never even been notified about. "This is a scam," I growled. "I've never received a single notice about these." Linda gave me a tight smile. "Oh, but you have. We sent emails. If you didn't check them, that's on you." Emails? My inbox was flooded with spam and junk mail. They knew that. They knew exactly how to bury their warnings until it was too late. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. "There's no way this is legal." "Well," Linda said, tapping her nails against the desk, "you're welcome to contest it in court. But in the meantime, the amount is due in full. If you fail to pay, we'll proceed with foreclosure." Foreclosure. The word hit me like a brick. They weren't just trying to find me. They were trying to take my house. I grabbed the letter, my entire body burning with anger. This wasn't just about money anymore. They wanted to ruin me. And at that moment, I made a decision. They thought I would roll over, that I'd panic and drain my savings, beg for a payment plan, or worse, give up my home. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I walked out of that office, my mind already working. If they wanted to fight, I was about to give them one they'd never forget. And by the time I was done, the HOA wouldn't just lose my house. They'd lose everything. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The walls of my own home suddenly felt like a prison, one I was paying for while a group of power-hungry HOA board members plotted to take it away from me. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was that smug look on Linda's face. $50,000. They expected me to just hand it over, as if it was pocket change. And if I didn't, they would take my house. I needed a plan. By sunrise, I had already gone through every possible way to fight back. Legal action, public exposure, even rallying the neighbors. But I knew one thing for certain. HOA played dirty. I had to be smarter. The first thing I did was dig through every email, every letter, every fine they had ever sent me. They had been setting me up for months. The fake violations, the hidden fees, the mysterious community charges. It was all carefully planned to make sure I didn't notice until it was too late. But here's where they messed up. They underestimated me. At 9 a.m., I was already parked outside the county clerk's office. If the HOA wanted to fight using paperwork, then I'd fight them the same way. I requested every public record related to my property, HOA's financial statements, and their official bylaws. And that's when I found something interesting. Buried deep within the HOA's financial records, something didn't add up. Their legal fund, the same one they used to threaten homeowners like me, had mysteriously doubled in the past year. Where was that money coming from? I needed answers. So I did something reckless. Something that could either expose the entire HOA or completely backfire on me. I went to an HOA board meeting. It was held at the community center, a place I rarely visited, but today was different. I walked in, heart pounding, and immediately felt the shift in the air. The room was filled with neatly dressed board members, sitting behind a long table, acting as if they were royalty ruling over peasants. And sitting right in the middle was Thomas Greer, the HOA president, the man behind it all. His eyes locked onto me the second I entered. "Well, Mr. Carter," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I assume you're here to settle your dues?" I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting for me to cave, to beg for mercy. Instead, I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm here to ask where the HOA's extra $50,000 went last year." The room fell silent. For the first time, Thomas looked uncomfortable. The other board members exchanged nervous glances, and Linda, who had been so smug the day before, suddenly found something very interesting about the floor. "I don't know what you're talking about," Thomas finally said, but I could hear the shift in his tone. "Oh, I think you do." I stepped forward, my heart racing. The HOA's legal fund suddenly doubled, but the members' payments didn't increase. So where did that money come from? A slow smirk formed on Thomas's lips. He knew I had something, but not enough. "This meeting is for official HOA business," he said, dismissing me with a wave. "If you have concerns, you're welcome to file a complaint." I gritted my teeth. I wasn't expecting him to fold immediately, but the fact that he wasn't outright denying it, that meant I was onto something. I turned toward the homeowners sitting in the audience, people just like me who had been bullied into submission. "How many of you have received fines in the past year?" A few hesitant hands went up, then a few more. I saw heads nodding, whispers spreading through the room. Thomas noticed too. His grip on power was slipping. "This is a waste of time," he snapped. "If you don't pay your dues, Mr. Carter, we will have no choice but to move forward with foreclosure." I took a deep breath, holding his gaze. They thought they had won, but I wasn't finished, because I had just uncovered the first crack in their empire, and I was about to tear it wide open. I walked out of that HOA meeting with more than just frustration. I walked out with a plan. They thought they had control, that they could bury their fraud under piles of paperwork and intimidation. But what they didn't know was that I had just seen the first real crack in their foundation, and now I was going to tear the whole thing down. I spent the next day digging deeper. If there was money missing, there had to be a paper trail. The problem was that the HOA controlled the official records, and they sure as hell weren't going to hand them over just because I asked nicely. That meant I needed another way in. That's when I remembered something. Linda, the treasurer, had been avoiding eye contact during the meeting, acting nervous the moment I mentioned the missing money. If anyone knew where the bodies were buried, it was her. I needed to find a way to rattle her. I waited until after dark before I made my move. The HOA office was closed, but I wasn't planning on breaking in. I didn't need to. Instead, I parked my car down the street and watched. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, Linda walked out, locking the door behind her. I followed at a safe distance, waiting until she was halfway to her car before I spoke. "Hey, Linda?" She spun around so fast she nearly dropped her purse. For a moment, I saw a real panic in her eyes before she covered it up with an annoyed scowl. "What do you want?" I held up my phone. Just a few questions. Like, why did the HOA's legal fund double last year? And why did the fines suddenly increase right after? Linda clenched her jaw. "I don't have to answer anything. If you have a problem, take it up with Thomas." "Oh, I will," I said, stepping closer. "But let's be honest, Linda. You're the one handling the money. That means if something illegal is going on, you're the one they'll throw under the bus first." Her face paled. That was it. The crack I needed. "You don't know what you're talking about," she muttered, turning to unlock her car. I stepped back. Maybe. Or maybe I already found enough to get the authorities interested. It's funny, though. If the HOA is clean, why do you look like you're about to be sick? She hesitated, her hand gripping the door handle, like a lifeline. For a second, I thought she might actually tell me something, but then she shook her head. "Stay out of this, Carter. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." That was the last thing she said before she got in her car and drove off. I stood there for a moment, watching her taillights disappear down the street. She was scared, which meant I was right. Something was going on inside that HOA, something big enough that even the people running it were starting to crack under pressure. And if they thought I was going to back off, they were dead wrong. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was going to bring them all down. The next morning, I woke up with only one thought in my mind. I needed proof. Linda's reaction had confirmed that something was off, but suspicion wasn't enough. If I wanted to destroy the HOA, I needed undeniable, irrefutable evidence that they were stealing money. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. If the HOA's funds had doubled, that money had to come from somewhere. I pulled up my bank statements, checking every HOA payment I had ever made. At first, everything looked normal. Monthly dues, small charges here and there. But then I saw it, an unauthorized withdrawal. It was listed as an administrative adjustment, a vague term that meant nothing. And it wasn't just one. There were multiple deductions over the past 6 months, all labeled under different names: community maintenance fees, security fund contributions, legal coverage assessments. They were siphoning money directly from homeowners' accounts. My hands tightened into fists. They weren't just charging fake fines. They were straight up stealing. I scrolled through the HOA's website, looking for any documentation about these charges. Nothing. No emails. No policy updates. They had never notified anyone about these fees. That was illegal. I needed to know if I was the only one. I sent messages to a few neighbors, people I knew had been fined recently. They all had the same charges. Some had lost hundreds, others had lost thousands, and none of them even realized it. This was it, the proof I needed. But I wasn't going to the police just yet. No, I wanted to see how far they were willing to go. I printed out everything: bank statements, emails, screenshots, and headed straight to the HOA office. But this time, I wasn't going in to argue. I was going to set a trap. The office was empty except for Linda, sitting behind her desk, flipping through paperwork. She looked up when I walked in, her face immediately tightening. "You again," she muttered. I dropped the stack of documents onto her desk. "Yeah, me again. You want to explain these?" Her eyes flickered over the pages, and for the first time, I saw real panic. "Where did you get these?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said. "Why has the HOA been pulling money from accounts without authorization?" Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know what you're talking about." I leaned in. "That's funny, because I have bank statements from multiple homeowners showing the exact same charges. So either you explain, or I go straight to the authorities." For a moment, she just sat there, gripping the edge of her desk. Then, in a low voice, she muttered, "You need to drop this, Carter. Walk away." I frowned. "Why?" She exhaled shakily. "Because this isn't just about HOA dues anymore. There are people involved in this, people you don't want to mess with." The air in the room suddenly felt colder. I had been expecting greed, corruption, maybe even fraud. But this was something else. "What do you mean, people?" I asked carefully. Linda hesitated, glancing toward the door like she was afraid someone might be listening. Then she leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're watching you." A chill ran down my spine. I had walked into this thinking it was about money, thinking it was about my house. But now I realized it was something much, much bigger. And I had just put myself in the middle of it. I walked out of that office feeling the weight of Linda's words pressing down on me. "They're watching you." It wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. And threats only meant one thing. I was getting too close. The question was, close to what? I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing through every possibility. This wasn't just about HOA corruption anymore. There were bigger players behind the scenes, people who weren't just collecting fines. They were making sure no one questioned them. I needed to find out who. That night, I did something risky. I decided to bait them. I posted an anonymous message in the community forum, one that I knew the HOA kept a close eye on. I pretended to be a concerned homeowner, asking if anyone else had experienced unexpected charges on their accounts. Within minutes, the post exploded. Neighbors were replying, some confused, some angry. But one comment stood out. Delete this now. You don't know what you're messing with. No name. No profile picture. Just a warning. My phone buzzed. A new email. No sender. No subject. Just one sentence. If you keep digging, you'll regret it. I stared at the screen, a slow realization sinking in. They weren't just watching me. They were waiting for me to make a mistake. I closed my laptop and pulled the curtains shut. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clearer than ever. They were scared. If they were going this far to silence me, it meant I was on the right track. But I wasn't backing down. The next morning, I made my move. If I wanted real answers, I needed to go straight to the source. The HOA president, Thomas Greer. I found him exactly where I expected, at the private golf club just outside town, a place where people like him gathered to pretend they were more important than they really were. I parked outside and waited. I knew his routine. Every Saturday, like clockwork, he played 18 holes with a group of local businessmen. It wasn't just golf. It was a meeting of power, deals being made over expensive cigars and overpriced whiskey. When he finally emerged, dressed in a pristine polo shirt and laughing like he didn't have a care in the world, I stepped out of my car. His smile disappeared the moment he saw me. "Carter," he said, feigning surprise. "Didn't expect to see you here." I didn't waste time. "We need to talk." He sighed, pulling off his sunglasses. "About what now?" I held up my phone. The unauthorized charges. The missing money. The threats. His expression didn't change, but I saw it. The flicker of something in his eyes. Not fear, not surprise, annoyance. Like I was a mosquito buzzing around his ear. "You're wasting your time," he said. "Even if there was something, what are you going to do? Go to the police? Sue the HOA? That's cute." I stepped closer. "You don't seem worried." Thomas chuckled. "Because I'm not. You think you've uncovered some big conspiracy, but let me explain something to you, Carter. The HOA isn't just about keeping lawns trimmed and houses painted. It's about control. And people like me, we own this town." I clenched my fists. "Not for long." Thomas smirked. "We'll see about that." He turned to walk away, but before he did, he left me with one last sentence. "Hope you're ready for what happens next." For the first time, I felt it. The real war had just begun. I didn't sleep that night. Every word Thomas said kept playing in my head, like a warning I couldn't shake. "We own this town. Hope you're ready for what happens next." He wasn't bluffing. He had power, connections, and worst of all, he was confident. That meant whatever the HOA was hiding, it was bigger than just a few stolen fines. By morning, I had made my decision. I needed to hit them where it hurt. I spent the next few hours gathering everything I had. The fraudulent charges, the hidden fees, the threats, the warnings, everything. Then I called an old friend, Jason Reed, investigative journalist. The kind of guy who didn't just write stories. He exposed people. He picked up on the second ring. "Carter? Been a while." I didn't waste time. "I've got a story for you. Corruption, fraud, maybe worse. But I needed to go public." There was a pause. Then, "I'm listening." I met him at a small diner on the outskirts of town. As soon as I walked in, I could tell Jason was already in journalist mode. Pen in hand, phone ready to record. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. I laid it all out. The stolen money, the fines, the threats. Linda's warning. The way Thomas acted like he was untouchable. Jason listened carefully, scribbling notes. But when I finished, he leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "This isn't just about the HOA, Carter. This sounds like money laundering." The words hit me like a slap. "Think about it," he continued. "They're overcharging homeowners, pulling money through hidden fees, and doubling their legal funds overnight. That's not just greed. That's organized crime." My mouth went dry. I had been thinking small, thinking in terms of HOA corruption. But Jason was right. This wasn't just about my house anymore. This was something much bigger. He flipped through the papers I had given him, shaking his head. "This could be huge, but I need more. I need names, bank records, something that connects them to a bigger operation." I exhaled slowly. I knew exactly where to get that. Linda. She was scared, but she was also the weak link. If I could get her to talk, I could bring the whole thing down. I left Jason with the documents and drove straight to Linda's house. I didn't call first. I couldn't give her time to think. When I knocked, It took a while before the door cracked open. Linda's face was pale, her eyes darting past me like she expected someone else to be there. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. I stepped inside before she could close the door. "I need answers, Linda. Now." She swallowed hard. "I told you, Carter. Drop this." I shook my head. "Not happening. Jason Reed is on board. He thinks this is bigger than just stolen HOA money." Her hands trembled. "You don't understand. They don't just steal. They make problems disappear." A chill ran down my spine. "Who are they, Linda?" She hesitated. Then finally she whispered 2 words. "The investors." I frowned. "What investors?" She exhaled shakily. "The HOA isn't just running the neighborhood. They're working with outside investors, people with real money. They use the HOA to funnel cash through fake fees, then clean it through community projects that never actually happen." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just corruption. This was an entire criminal network. I pulled out my phone. "I need proof." Linda shook her head furiously. "No. If they find out I talked to you, they already know I'm digging," I said. "They're going to come after me whether you talk or not. But if we take them down together, we can end this." For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the floor. Then, slowly, she walked to a locked cabinet, pulled out a folder, and handed it to me. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, emails, proof of everything. I looked up at her. "You just saved a lot of people?" She shook her head. "You don't get it, Carter. You just put a target on your back." I tightened my grip on the folder. "Let them come." I gripped the folder tightly as I left Linda's house. The weight of what I was holding settled deep in my gut. This wasn't just HOA corruption anymore. This was organized crime, and now I had proof. But Linda was right about one thing. I had just put a target on my back. I drove straight home, locking my doors the second I stepped inside. My heart was pounding, my hands still shaking from what I had just learned. I spread the documents across my kitchen table, scanning through them again. Bank statements, wire transfers, fake invoices. Everything pointed to one thing. Thomas and the HOA weren't just stealing money. They were laundering it. The investors Linda mentioned? They were using the HOA as a front, funneling dirty money through fake neighborhood projects, pocketing the clean cash, and making sure anyone who questioned them got buried in debt, or worse. I needed to get this to Jason. I reached for my phone, ready to call him, when something outside caught my eye. A black SUV, parked across the street. I froze. It wasn't a neighbor's car. I knew every vehicle on this street, and this one didn't belong here. The windows were tinted, too dark to see inside. But I could feel it. Someone was watching me. I took a slow breath, trying to act normal. If they knew I had the documents, I was already in danger. But I couldn't panic. Not yet. I grabbed my laptop, plugged in a flash drive, and started making copies of everything. A backup. Just in case. The SUV didn't move. It just sat there, waiting. I had 2 choices. Sit here and wait for them to make their move, or get ahead of them. I chose the latter. I grabbed the folder, shoved it into my jacket, and slipped out the back door. My car was parked in the driveway, but there was no way I was using it. If they were watching me, they were watching my car too. So I went on foot, cutting through the backyard. I kept my head low, moving fast. My heart was hammering, but my mind was focused. I needed to get to Jason before they realized I was gone. 2 blocks away, I caught a cab. As I climbed in, I glanced back. The SUV was still there, still watching my empty house. They thought I was inside. Good. Let them think that. I gave the driver Jason's address, my hands gripping the folder like a lifeline. We were halfway across town when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A low voice came through the line. Calm. Controlled. You're making a mistake, Carter. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't respond. You don't want to do this, the voice continued. Turn around. Go home. Forget about this. And we'll forget about you. I clenched my jaw. Not happening. A pause. Then a sigh. That's unfortunate. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my pulse racing. They weren't trying to scare me anymore. This was a warning, and I had just ignored it. I gripped the folder tighter, my mind racing. The call had been a final warning. One last chance to back off before things turned ugly. But I wasn't backing off. Not now. Not ever. The cab pulled up outside Jason's apartment. I scanned the area before stepping out, checking for anything suspicious. No black SUVs. No strange figures lurking in the shadows. Still, I wasn't taking any chances. I took the stairs 2 at a time, knocking hard on Jason's door. It took a few seconds before he opened it, his eyes widening when he saw me. "You look like hell," he said, stepping aside. I didn't waste time. I walked in, locked the door behind me, and dumped the folder onto his kitchen table. "We got a problem?" Jason sat down, flipping through the documents. His usual casual demeanor faded as he scanned the bank statements, the fake invoices, the wire transfers. "This is big," he muttered. "No kidding," I said. "And I think they know I have it." He looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" I exhaled. I was being watched. Black SUV outside my house. Then I got a call. No name. No number. Just a warning to back off. Jason let out a low whistle. "That's not just some HOA scam, Carter. That's serious." I ran a hand through my hair. "I need to get this out there before they come after me. If we publish this, they lose their power." Jason nodded, his brain already working. "We can't just post it online. If these guys have the kind of money I think they do, they'll bury it before anyone notices. We need someone bigger." I frowned. "Like who?" Jason tapped his fingers on the table, thinking. Then his eyes lit up. "I have a contact at a national news outlet. If we give them this story, they'll run it before the HOA has a chance to cover their tracks." I nodded. "Do it." Jason pulled out his phone and made the call. I listened as he explained the situation, listing off every detail, every crime, every shady deal. Then his expression changed. He stiffened, his grip tightening around the phone. "What?" I asked. He didn't respond at first. Then, slowly, he put the phone on speaker. A voice came through. "I don't know who gave you this information," the person on the other end said, "but tell Carter he's already too late." A cold wave washed over me. Jason looked at me, confusion and worry in his eyes. "What do you mean?" The voice continued, calm and matter-of-fact. "The HOA already knows, and they're not waiting around to see what you do next." A sharp knock sounded at Jason's door. My blood turned to ice. We both froze. Another knock. Harder this time. Jason looked at me. "That's not good." I didn't move. I barely breathed. Then came a voice from the other side of the door. "Open up, Carter." They had found me. Jason and I exchanged a tense glance. The knocks on the door grew louder, more impatient. Whoever was outside wasn't here to talk. Jason's hand hovered over his phone, but I shook my head. If they know we called someone, they'll make sure we never get another chance. He swallowed hard. "So what do we do?" I scanned the apartment. There was no way out except the front door and the windows, but we were on the 4th floor. Not an option. Another knock. Then a voice. "Carter, we know you're in there. Open the door, and we can talk like adults." Like adults? I had just been threatened over the phone. There was nothing adult about what was happening here. Jason moved toward the kitchen. "I have a back exit. Fire escape through the window." I followed him, but before we could move, the door handle rattled. "They're trying to break in," Jason whispered. My mind raced. If we climbed down the fire escape, they'd see us the second we hit the ground. We needed a distraction. I grabbed a glass from the counter and hurled it against the far wall. The shattering sound echoed through the apartment. Silence. Then, the voice outside muttered something, and the knock stopped. "They're trying to figure out what that was," I whispered. "This is our chance." Jason opened the window, and we climbed onto the narrow metal steps. The night air was sharp against my skin, my heartbeat so loud it felt like it might give us away. We moved fast. One floor down, then another. I kept my eyes on the alley below, expecting to see men waiting. Instead, I saw something worse. The black SUV, parked at the end of the street. They weren't just inside. They had the whole building covered. I grabbed Jason's arm, pulling him to a stop. "They're waiting for us?" Jason cursed under his breath. "Then we need another way out?" We were 1 floor from the ground when the fire escape suddenly shook violently. I looked up. A man was climbing down after us. Jason's eyes widened. "They're coming?" No time to think. No time to hesitate. I jumped down the last few feet, landing hard on the pavement. Jason followed, stumbling as he hit the ground. The SUV doors opened. Two men stepped out. Suits, cold expressions, moving with the confidence of people who didn't need to run. We bolted. Footsteps pounded behind us. Shouts rang out, but we didn't stop. We turned a corner, cutting through a side street. Jason gasped. "Where the hell are we going?" "The only place they won't expect," I said. And I knew exactly where that was. I sprinted through the dimly lit alley. Jason right behind me, our footsteps echoing against the brick walls. The men from the SUV weren't running. That was what scared me the most. They weren't afraid of losing us because they didn't think we had anywhere to go. But they were wrong. We cut through another street, past rows of closed shops and flickering streetlights. Jason was panting beside me. "Where the hell are we going?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I needed to make sure we weren't being funneled toward a dead end. If these guys were as organized as I thought, they wouldn't need to chase us. They'd have people waiting ahead. That's why I chose the one place they'd never expect us to go. The HOA office. Jason skidded to a stop when he realized where we were. "Are you insane?" he hissed. "This is the first place they'll look." "Exactly," I whispered, glancing around. "Which means they won't expect us to hide here." The building was dark, empty. I knew the HOA didn't keep security at night. They never had a reason to. Who would be stupid enough to break into their office? Me. I tested the front door. Locked. No surprise. But I had anticipated this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small screwdriver I had taken from Jason's apartment. The lock on the back entrance wasn't fancy. It was just a standard deadbolt. I jammed the screwdriver in and twisted hard. A soft click. Jason shook his head. "You've done this before." "Let's go," I muttered, pushing the door open. The office was exactly as I remembered. Rows of file cabinets, the front desk, Linda's workspace to the side. I moved quickly, heading straight for the records room. If I was right, there had to be more here than what Linda gave me. Jason stood guard while I rifled through the drawers, scanning for anything that could connect the HOA to the investor she mentioned. There had to be something bigger, something undeniable. And then I found it. A hidden compartment inside one of the filing cabinets. It was locked, but the key was already in the drawer. Careless mistake. I twisted it open and pulled out a single folder labeled Private Accounts. The second I saw the names listed inside, my breath caught. City officials, real estate developers, local law enforcement. This wasn't just an HOA scam. This was a web of corruption that stretched beyond the neighborhood. Jason peered over my shoulder. His face went pale. "Carter, do you realize what this means?" I did. We weren't just exposing the HOA anymore. We were about to take down an entire system. Suddenly, headlights flooded the office windows. I turned sharply. The SUV, parked outside. The doors opened, and figures stepped out, moving toward the entrance. "We have been found," Jason swore under his breath. "We are so screwed." I stuffed the folder inside my jacket. No matter what happened next, I wasn't leaving without this. Then the front door handle turned. They were coming in. The door handle twisted again, this time harder. Jason and I locked eyes. We had seconds before they got in. Running wasn't an option. Hiding was useless. That left only one choice. We had to fight smart. I scanned the office, searching for anything useful. The only advantage we had was that they didn't know what we had found yet. If they wanted to keep this quiet, they wouldn't risk gunfire. That gave us a small window to play this to our advantage. Jason grabbed a chair, his knuckles white. "What's the plan?" he whispered. I reached for my phone and hit record. If something happened to us, there had to be proof. The door burst open. 3 men stepped inside, dressed in suits but built like enforcers. They weren't just HOA muscle. They were here to clean up a mess. The man in front, a cold-eyed guy with graying hair, took a step forward. "Carter," he said, voice smooth but dangerous. "Let's make this easy." I held my ground. "That's funny. I was about to say the same thing." He smirked, but there was no amusement in his eyes. "You have something that doesn't belong to you?" I patted my jacket where the private accounts folder was hidden. "You mean this?" His smirk faltered. That was all the confirmation I needed. Jason tensed beside me. "If we don't walk out of here, people are going to know why," he said, nodding toward my phone. "You think we didn't prepare for this?" The man's expression hardened. We had put them in a corner. They could take the folder from us, but if we had already sent the information elsewhere, it wouldn't matter. The silence stretched. Then he exhaled, like we were just an inconvenience. You think you're smart, Carter, he said, but you don't know who you're dealing with. Enlighten me, I shot back. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You think this ends with the HOA? You think if you expose us, it'll bring us down? We own the courts, the police, the entire city. Take us down, and there will be 10 more to replace us. I felt Jason shift beside me. He was nervous. Hell, I was too. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I held his gaze. Maybe, but it won't be you. His smirk faded. That's when the sirens started blaring outside. The room tensed. Jason's eyes widened. You called the cops? He whispered. I shook my head. I did something better. I pulled out my phone and held it up, revealing the live stream still running. Thousands of people were watching, commenting, and just as I expected, one of them had tipped off the media. Outside, headlights flashed. News vans. Police cars. The man's jaw clenched. You little... Careful, I warned. There are a lot of eyes on us right now. The room was charged with tension. They had lost. They couldn't kill us. They couldn't cover this up. The whole world knew. Jason exhaled a shaky breath. So what now? I stepped forward. Now? We watch your empire fall. The sirens grew louder. The men exchanged looks. Then, slowly, the leader stepped back, fixing his suit. This isn't over, he muttered. I smiled. Yeah, it is. The police stormed in, and just like that, the reign of the HOA was over.